For joining us today for our Refresh Your Resume presentation. We hope you find it useful. For housekeeping purposes, I just want to mention that today's program is going to be recorded so that we can send it out to any students who were not able to join us today. And also that if you have questions, please feel free to post them in the chat. And I'll ask Joanne Casey to just keep an eye on the chat and let me know. Okay. Okay. So for those of you attending today's program, I just want to make it clear that this program really is addressed to updating your traditional legal resume. And the traditional legal resume is the resume that law firms and public interest organizations and government agencies look for summer associates, law clerks, and entry-level associate positions. You probably already know this, but I think it bears repeating. The traditional legal resume is always clean with plenty of white space. There is no objective or summary statement, which is something that distinguishes it from many other resumes, many other fields of professional fields, I should say. We use a paragraph format with clear summaries, and it's in reverse chronological order. I should also mention that it is very common to include volunteer experience and skills and interests in a legal resume at the end of the resume. So since many of you have already created your legal resumes as you applied for jobs for this summer, and before that, there are really just a few areas that will need to be updated and cleaned up. One is adding your class rank or your GPA. And this year is a little bit different because of COVID. And so what we recommend you do is add your class rank rounded to the nearest whole number for the fall semester, if that is something that you want to include on your resume. If class rank is something that the employers you're interested in require, then you'll want to include it. So you'll see here I've included a parenthetical next to class rank that indicates that it's been calculated as of fall semester 2019. For your GPA, we recommend that anyone with a GPA with a 3.0 or better should include it on their resume. And here too, you'll note that traditionally we just use a cumulative GPA. But because this year the spring grades were not included in the class rank, we thought that it was important to break out the spring semester and fall semester GPA in addition to your cumulative GPA. You'll want to include any honors that you have received this year. Many of you will have made law review or written onto a journal, and that's where you'll want to include that information, as well as Dean's List. And then of course, you should keep on your resume the awards that you received probably coming into law school, your scholarships, for example, and then add any activities that you have participated in this year. And I just used here as an example, if you were a volunteer for any of the moot court competitions, you could include the specific competition. And then of course, if you're a member of the Student Bar Association, you may want to include that as well. You'll also note here that I've included a category of select coursework. And here I just use an example, the class of property with the grade next to it in parentheticals. The only time I would really recommend that you include a select coursework category underneath the education section is if you're applying to a firm or any kind of employer that has a practice area for which the course is particularly relevant. It's a great way to demonstrate your interest and your proficiency with the materials. Okay, so using the tips that I just provided in an updated education section on a resume might look like this. You'll see where I have added the class rank, the GPA. I've just picked these honors of law review and dean's list and the activities of Student Bar Association. I do want to point out that although it's tempting to include every activity that you take part in at the law school, it's advisable to limit it to, I put here 3 to 5, but I would really choose 3 so that you don't dilute the ones that you really want to emphasize the most to the employer.
Dean Fitzpatrick?
Sure.
I just want to, a question that comes up a lot is teaching assistants. If they're a teaching assistant, where that might go.
Great question. Thank you, Joanne. So for teaching assistants, you can add that underneath activities here as well. And I would add the class name and then just teaching, teaching assistant and the semester. If you are a research assistant, however, and you are conducting research for a professor this summer, then I would add that to experience. I would use the professor's name as the employer and then a description of the areas of law that you're researching. Okay, so that brings us to updating your experience. So in line with the norms of a legal resume, you're going to follow that reverse chronological order, and you're going to place this summer's internship or your most recent internship at the top of your experience. And you'll note for this one, I just chose Judge D'Agostino. And what I did was I wrote it in the past tense, assuming that this internship would be over by the time the student is uploading and applying. However, if you are still at your internship when you're applying for positions, then you can write the description in present tense, and you should. But all past descriptions, or all past positions rather, should be written in past tense. And then one tip that I wanted to share with you is if you, as you're going through your descriptions and reviewing them to ensure they're as strong as they can be, if you pull up a job description for summer associate and look at the terms that the employer is using in describing the skills they're looking for and in describing the scope of the position, you can use some of those exact terms in describing your summer work, provided that they're accurate, right? You never want to risk having anything on your resume that isn't 100% true, but certainly some of the work that you've done regarding research, writing, analysis will be terms used in those summer associate descriptions. And then the other thing that I would note for this summer, next to legal intern, if you worked in your summer internship remotely, I think that it is worth it to add it there in a parenthetical that you worked remotely due to COVID-19. And then you'll note in the description that I added that the conferences were held over Zoom or whatever technology your employer is using. I think it's worth it to include. The other areas that you will probably want to update are at the end of your resume. You may now have some professional affiliations as a result of being in law school for a year or more for some of you. And so, for example, if you're a student member of NYSBA or the ABA, or the Albany County Lawyers Association, and you're involved in a section, then this is a great place to add that information. And then the other thing that you can think about adding is if you have skills or certifications. For example, many law students get the Lexis Advanced certification. I think Westlaw also offers a certification. You could add that to the bottom of your resume as well. All right, so with that said, I'm going to stop sharing these slides and I'm going to try to pull up the resume that we've created for you to get a look at how all of these things come together. Sorry, bear with me for 1 second. Here we go. All right, so you'll note here, my favorite student here, Jane Doe. We're not very original with our samples. So what I've added here, and I want to point out that I have no idea if these calculations would actually work out in terms of GPA matching class rank. So please don't use this as any kind of measurement for that. But you'll note that I have included her class rank as top 7%, noted that that is calculated as of fall semester 2019. I have included GPA, including the cumulative GPA and the spring semester 2020, as well as fall semester 2019. I've included her honors, awards, and activities. And then you'll note that for this summer's experience as a law clerk, I've added the parenthetical that this work was remote due to COVID-19. And I think that's really important for employers to be reminded about what the challenges have been for this summer. And so the descriptions, the current, because I'm pretending she's currently there, is written in the present tense. The others are written in the past tense. And then you'll note that I've added her professional affiliations, as well as skills and certifications. I will note, although I didn't break out language skills here as separate from certifications, if you have the room, you could use language skills and then a separate heading for certifications. As long as you can keep your resume to 1 page. That is still the standard. Okay, so with that, are there any questions so far before I move on to the second portion of our program?
There is nothing in the chat right now.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jimmy. All right. So just get to where I was. Okay. So a few notes about uploading your resume onto Albany Law Link in order to participate in our recruiting programs that are going to happen here. The first one begins August 10th. That's the first recruiting program. And you'll have to submit your documents for that from the time period between July 20th and July 22nd. So just a couple of reminders. Please upload your resume in Word format, and then Albany Law Link will convert it to PDF. And the reason for that is that if we have both, then if for some reason there is a typo or error on the resume that we happen to catch, and I should point out, it would just be, we do expect the resumes to be in perfect shape once you upload them. But if there's something we need to change really quickly, having your resume there in Word is very helpful for us. So please do that. To upload your transcript, which many of the employers participating in these programs will require. You'll log into WebAdvisor. You're going to click on print, which you may not have a printer, so that seems counterintuitive, but then you're going to save it. You'll have the option to save that as a PDF, and then please upload the PDF to Albany Law Link. And then once you have those documents uploaded, please open them and make sure that they are not corrupted. From time to time, we have had experiences where the documents, for whatever reason, have been corrupted, and it has ended up destroying the student's entire file in terms of all the employers they apply to. So if we can prevent that from happening, that would be great. As I mentioned, the first time that you'll upload and the first time that you'll apply will begin July 20th through the 22nd. And we had been previously asked about summer grades. And so I'll say traditionally, employers are not looking for your grades from this summer. And so we've actually never had to provide transcripts from summer courses. But I understand that some of you may want to share your summer grades with employers because of the situation during the spring semester. So what you can do is contact, you should have your summer transcripts, I think, by the end of July. That's my understanding. And so contact your career counselor and ask them to help you to update your application with your summer transcript by August 3rd. And we'll make sure that any employers to whom you've applied will get a copy of that summer transcript. And then last, please don't forget to apply to the Resume Collect employers. You probably know from our previous program on recruiting that there is a session under Albany Law Link that is Resume Collect. And those employers traditionally look at our students and hire our students. So please make sure you take advantage of that. Okay. Because this is a really unique year, I think it's very important for all of us to be thinking beyond what we have done traditionally in terms of recruiting. And so I encourage you to do independent research on where you can be applying now for next summer, right? So if you're interested in government and public interest, some of the best resources that we know of are usajobs.gov. That's where you're going to find the honors programs for federal agencies that are wonderful opportunities for second summer. And many of those honors opportunities are posted in August, traditionally. For example, I know the SEC has posted in August in years past. So do keep an eye on those opportunities. If you're interested in district attorney's offices, we believe they will be, many of them will be participating in our recruiting programs. Some of them will be participating later in the fall, but there is no reason why you should be precluded from looking directly on their websites. For example, the Manhattan District Attorney's Office has their summer associate program or has had their summer associate program listed on their website in years past. So I encourage you to look at those websites directly. In addition to state attorney general's offices and state and local government offices, you know, for example, the New York City nyc.gov has its own website that includes opportunities. For public interest, which I will distinguish that between I'll distinguish between public interest and government by saying many public interest employers are really focused on direct legal services. So for example, the Legal Aid Society of Northeastern New York is a true public interest provider. And for those opportunities, please take a look at psjd.org I think it's a little bit early for them to be posting for next summer because they traditionally would post in the spring for next summer, but it's worth it to take a look. In terms of law firms, and I'm talking here specifically about big law, what I have noticed and what we have heard from many of our larger law firm partners is that they're moving their recruiting programs to January. I did a search this morning on Google just to make sure that this is still accurate. And I indeed noticed that when I searched Summer Associate 2021 on Google, I came up with a number of law firm websites where they had not yet posted any information on recruiting. So this is something that's still developing. But there are things that you can do to get yourself ready if this is one of your interests, if working for big law is something that you're interested in doing. I would suggest that you take a look at the AmLaw 100 list. I think it came out in March or April. That essentially is, and I love this quote, the AmLaw 100 is that much ballyhooed annual ranking of America's biggest, most prestigious, most profitable firms. And that is really what the list is. But you should know that there are different tiers of law firms among big law. And the most prestigious, let's say the 1 to 50, or top 50, I should say, are going to be very competitive in terms of grades and in terms of class rank and journal and law review. And so that's something to consider as you're doing your research and figuring out where you might want to be geographically and what firms you may want to target. You can also look at the National Law Journal's Top 500 and NALP.org, which has a very useful directory of legal employers, as well as Vault. Joanne, did I see that there's perhaps a question?
There is a question. Amani has the question, and she would like to know, oh, and Mina also has one. So Amani wanted to know, will these fairs be geared towards Masters of Law students as well?
So this recruiting that I'm speaking of right now is not geared toward MSLS. And really so I would say that the type of career fair that is going to be geared toward MSLS students, depending on your focus area, are going to be compliance positions, right? And so we hopefully will have one of those types of fairs, but in the meantime, I think that it's really useful to be looking for those compliance analyst positions right now. And there is a list of resources, I believe, that we can provide after the program, if you just want to send me an email.
Thank you. And then Mina also had a great question. She said, if you're involved in a clinic in the fall, do we include that on our resume?
Oh, Mina, what a great question. Yes, you do. And I wish I had included that on my sample. Yes, and what you will do is you don't have to include a description because that could change and you don't want to misrepresent what you're doing or will be doing. So just use the name of the clinic. So for example, the employer would be the community and the Albany Law School Community Development Clinic, for example. Your title would be legal intern, and just use, instead of dates, to commence fall 2020. And then you don't need to include a description.
Thank you. And that is all the questions so far.
Great, good questions.
Oh, that's all the questions we have so far.
Okay.
Gotta double check.
Okay, so in addition to independent research, right, in these various ways, You should make sure that you are utilizing your network during this time. I cannot emphasize this enough because the Career Center may know contacts at specific organizations or law firms and can put you in touch, if not for recruiting purposes, then really for the purpose of beginning a good, strong professional relationship with an alum. So please make sure that you ask us if you have specific firms or organizations you're interested in. Likewise, I'm positive that you can rely upon our faculty. And if you've had a class where you have a good relationship with a faculty member, or if you're interested in a substantive area of law where you know we have a faculty member, don't be hesitant to reach out and ask for help in connecting with employers in that space. Of course, requesting to link with alumni through LinkedIn is an excellent way to build your network, and I highly recommend it. I've never had an alum turn down a request from a student on LinkedIn. And then if you participate in the alumni mentoring program, ask your alumni or your alumni mentor to meet you over Zoom for a cup of coffee and get some advice on things that you can do and ways in which you can reach out now to prepare for your next steps. And then of course, if you're working this summer, for example, in the case where I used the internship with Judge D'Agostino, if you are working alongside Judge D'Agostino's clerks, ask your colleagues about what they did in their second summer and how they prepared for it and how they got to where they are. And then I don't want to give you that advice and then not give you tools for following through, right? So, and this information is available on Albany Law Link in much more detail. But I'll just point out here that when you're reaching out to alumni or you're reaching out to a colleague, you are the one who's driving the car. You are the one who's driving the process. So know why you're reaching out, and it's not to get a job. I know it feels like it should be to get a job, and ultimately we hope that it provides you with access to decision makers who can eventually get you to where you want to go. But really what you're doing is you're reaching out as part of your own due diligence to figure out if that organization or that type of work is something that you might be interested in doing in the future. So demonstrate that you have done your research. If it is a very big law firm, know what industries that they practice in, know who their client base is, make sure that you have targeted questions. You're there to learn and demonstrate your desire to cultivate your own understanding. And then along those same lines, in preparing for that conversation, make sure that you do a lot of research. Don't ask questions that you could know by doing your own research, but instead demonstrate your curiosity and your eagerness to be a part of either the company or the practice area or the opportunity. And we also have this on Albany Law Link, but it might be useful, I thought, to just provide to you a sample. You could change this depending on your personal circumstances or depending on your audience. But here I just, for this sample, John Doe is interested in intellectual property law, and you can see that that's his specific reason for reaching out. So the reader already knows, right? Presumably the reader who's receiving this is someone who works in IP, already understands that John has done some research. John's pointing out that he too attends Albany Law School and that the recipient of the email he noticed is also an alum. And then what's your ask, right? So I'm writing to ask if you would take the time to meet with me to provide me with advice on how you started your career and what I can do to prepare myself for this type of practice. provide your resume by way of background, and then give the person some availability so that you're not going back and forth 100 times. The more available you can make yourself for the meeting, the better. And then a simple closing. Thank you for considering my request, and I hope to hear from you. And then you'll note I always close these formal emails with a sincerely. No warm regards or anything else. It's just very professional, sincerely. And I always use a colon after the salutation in these more formal emails for outreach. And I've included here a little bit about John that is relevant to this email. I have seen signature lines go on and on, 6 or 7 lines, and I recommend that you don't do that. Signature line really should, we could include John's telephone number, certainly, but really 2 or 3 items indicating who you are and your contact information is sufficient. And I think that is the end of our formal program. So I will now open it up for any questions that you may have.
Fitzpatrick, there's nothing in the chat right now, and I don't see anyone raising their hands as of yet.
Okay. Well, hopefully this program has been.
I'm sorry. Nick, you have a question?
Yeah, sorry to cut you off, Dean Fitzpatrick. You were talking before about how when you're doing work this summer for a research assistant role, to put it in the experience section. For a description of that, what is like a best way of putting out like a description of a research assistant? If all I'm really doing is researching and just telling them what I have for research. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a good question, Nick. So what you will want to do is include a little bit of the specifics around the substantive area of research, right? So your description would be pretty bland if it was just researched for professor, right? So for example, if you're researching, I don't know, let's just say contract issues, or you're researching for a law review article, include the topic of the law review article, right? So do you want to share a little bit about just a snippet of the research you're doing or what it's going to be used for?
Yeah, so I'm working with Professor Hutter on a excited utterance exception to hearsay question. Yeah, so, but he hasn't exactly told me what he's doing quite yet for the project, so it's kind of hard to be like, oh, we're doing this for a law review article or anything like that, because he hasn't really figured that out yet.
Yep, that's totally fine. So your description is going to be, research the federal rules of evidence as they pertain to the excited utterance exception. And if that's what you've done at this point, that's perfect. And any lawyer reading that will understand what you worked on and why it's really important, particularly if you're applying for litigation positions.
Perfect, thank you.
You got it. Christina Vitola.
Hi, thank you all for doing this. This is very helpful. So I know on the sample resume, you mentioned a little bit about interests. I've gotten some mixed feedback from various people that I've asked for advice whether or not to include a line of interests and hobbies and things of that nature. So can you speak to that a little bit? Thank you.
Sure. And I fully appreciate that it's subjective, right? So the reason why I encourage students to include some interests is because it's just a great way to break the ice from the interviewer's point of view. I have heard that many interviews will start with a question about interests. Similarly, I've heard that students ended up talking to interviewers a great deal about interests, and that was what allowed them to sort of form that rapport. So and I also think that including interests, when you're considering what interests to include, they should be something that you feel comfortable speaking about and that set you apart, right? And I am someone who really does not have very interesting interests. And so I would probably have a hard time coming up with something that really distinguished me on my resume. So maybe if I couldn't think of something a little bit more interesting than, reading historical fiction, then I might leave my interests off. But, I've had students include things like hiked all of the, and I can't remember how many there are, but all of the Adirondack peaks, right? And those were great conversation starters. I've also had students indicate that in their interests, they were very interested in the stock market and in following, financial trends. And depending on the audience, that could be something that might really stand out. If you're someone who's interested in working for a firm that has a lot of financial market clients. So I guess what I would say, Christina, is think about what you would be inclined to include and then assess whether that really speaks to the candidate you want to put forward. In other words, does it really accurately represent who you are as a candidate? And then what does that say to the employer? And if you think that's meaningful and something that is worthy of consideration, then include it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions before we go?
Nothing in the chat right now.
Okay. Well, you know that you can find sample resumes on Albany Law Link. You should feel free to send your resume to your career counselor once you have it in what you consider to be perfect form. We are happy to look at it again, make sure that it represents you in the best possible light, and follow up with us if you have any questions or if there are any firms or alumni with whom you would like to be connected. Oh, and I think Lima will send out a recording to all students of this program. Great. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.